listening to the EPT Works Listen, Love, Give podcast. Hi, I'm Dr. Annette Cargioli, the Forgiveness Doctor. I'm here to help you create phenomenal health, happiness, and new life with energy, intuition, and forgiveness. EPT is short for Emotional Polarity Technique, an innovative, holistic emotional therapy that will change your life for good. You can subscribe to this podcast, get free EPT training at eptworks.com, and like us on Facebook. In this podcast, you will learn about the defensive aspects of character types. These descriptions are taken from the energy healing classic book, Light Emerging by Barbara Brennan. In part 1, I'll describe the 5 basic defense patterns that people use when they are triggered by fear in any situation. In part 2 of this podcast, I'll give you some dynamic affirmations and forgiveness statements that you can use to become more conscious when you find yourself in life situations that trigger your predictable unconscious pattern of defense. Have you ever known someone whose reactionary behavior is ridiculously predictable? For example, every time you say what you want, this person will want the opposite. Or another one you may have encountered, every time you get into a deep discussion and you think it's going really well, this person will turn it into a full-on conflict and then blame you for causing it. You may have thought it was just them, but here's the deal. Everyone has at least one automatic defense pattern that shows up without you even thinking about it. It gets played every time you feel threatened or afraid. Your defense pattern is something you were born with. You need a response to things that threaten you. An automatic response, one you don't even think about. It just happens as a way of protecting you. It is the unconscious programming that you were born with. Here's what you're going to learn from this podcast. What is your unconscious go-to reaction when you feel threatened? You will also learn how to recognize these unconscious reactions existing in others. This is so valuable because when you recognize these reactions, you know the person is just playing their song, so to speak. They're not making a conscious decision. They're basically in a trance and not driving their own core defensive reactions. When you see people, even yourself, who are constantly predictable in their defensive behavior, you know they are very unconscious. They are just going through the motions in life without regard to creating anything new or better for their life. EPT is a healing modality that strategically raises one's consciousness and frees you up to create a new and improved life experience. Hopefully, this information will also raise your consciousness so that you can begin to be aware of all those times when you are just going off the reservation because you stopped using your power to be present in a threatening situation. When you can show up or be present, you open yourself up to infinite possibilities for conscious decision-making that can create new and improved outcomes in your life. In Barbara Brennan's book, Light Emerging, she describes 5 defense character types. That's right, you only have to learn 5. You might want to keep this in mind as I go through this information. Most people are wired with just one go-to defense pattern. Those who identify with more than one have likely developed more ways to defend themselves out of an abusive childhood. So let's look at these 5 defense patterns as described in Barbara Brennan's book, Light Emerging. The first one is called Type P, and I'm talking about this one first because it is the most difficult. People who have this defense pattern have the harder life. And I say that because, everybody goes through hard things, but when you look at a herd of people, everybody in that herd does not have the hardest life. There are certain people who really go through difficult life experiences, like being abused by their father, having their mother leave home, then getting married to an abusive man and divorcing him and having another abusive man, and then that abusive man gets custody of your children. And then your father kicks you out as an adult. That kind of hard life. That's what a P has. And part of what they've gone through in life actually draws more of it to them. So I'm going to talk about type P because these are people that you need to know how to be around. If you are a type P, it doesn't mean that you cannot become aware. It means that you really have to work hard to become aware. You have to pay attention and break these patterns in your life to stop the pain and to stop the trauma. It's just that the traumas that happen to you bring up the defense pattern. So type P, their main issue is betrayal. Now, when I say their main issue, this is from Barbara Brennan's book, and what I believe happens is that it's an inherited pattern. So someone had something terrible that happened in the family or generational line that had to do with betrayal, and because of that betrayal, they need to control, and then that's inherited. And so a child might be born with this automatic behavior as their defense pattern. And their defense pattern, again, this isn't who they are every waking minute. This is the automatic behavior that just starts to play out when they feel some kind of threat in their environment or they feel afraid. And in modern day, we don't have bears chasing us. So feeling afraid could just be going to somebody's house who has a really nice house and you don't have such nice things. And you go and you feel threatened because they have so many nice things. That could be something that threatens you. It could be someone who just pulls out in front of you with a car and they didn't even mean it, but you felt threatened and afraid and you go into this automatic behavior pattern. So I want you to get that in your head so you kind of understand exactly what I'm talking about. This automatic behavior pattern that we go into is predictable. You have one that you go into. Most people only have one. As I said before, the ones who have more than one, those have been developed out of a very abusive childhood. But in general, even the kid who has more than one, they have one they were born with. And the others, as you heal their trauma, those other defense patterns just kind of melt away. They just go away. And it's to protect you. So the type P's greatest fear is letting go and trusting. They have experienced being used and betrayed over and over. And because of this, their defensive action is controlling others. The result of their defensive action is when they control others, they just have more betrayal drawn to them, more aggression and betrayal. Because guess what? When you control somebody, they don't usually like it and they get aggressive with you. So this defense pattern just draws more violence or aggression toward them, even though their defense pattern is set up to protect them. Now, their relationship to their core essence is, deep down, the type P is afraid that they are bad. And they'll even say that to you. When you hear somebody say, I'm just afraid I'm bad. I just think I'm just bad or evil. So we're talking bad or evil. We're not talking not enough. We're talking bad or evil, like they are afraid they are unredeemable at the soul level. Their human need is to trust that others can make mistakes and they will still be safe. Their spiritual need is to recognize and honor core essence and higher will of others. So did you get that? Their spiritual need is to let go of control and honor that other people have authority in their own life to make their decisions for themselves and to control their actions. That is the P's spiritual need, is to recognize that authority existing in other people too. Their time distortion, and this is kind of interesting, when somebody is in defense, like running from the bear, what am I going to do when the scary thing happens? What's my first reaction I have to protect myself? So Barbara Brennan lists time distortions that are very interesting as well. So type P rushes into the future, basically right into the worst case scenario, and that justifies why I should keep controlling right now. So that's type P. I want to tell you that type P's, their sole need is to be heard. And this is really important. If you knew that somebody had the hardest life that it's possible for humans to have, your heart kind of says, well, what can I do to help? Even though these people can sometimes, when they're in defense mode, be very off-putting and you don't want them in your face. You don't want to talk to them because typically if you get in a conversation with one of these people when they're in defense mode, they will chew you up, spit you out, and then say, you started it. That's what they'll do. You'll get in a conversation that seems pretty innocent, and then before you know it, they are in this huge conflict with you, and you're upset, and you're like, well, how did this happen? And then they say, you caused it. It's a very winding kind of thing that happens. It's almost like they hook you in and then take you down, and they're very good at it when they're in that defense mode. So what you need to know is that these people in their defense mode are not interested in your opinion. They also don't need for you to agree with everything they say. Even though they're in your face telling what their opinion is to you and they're in your face doing it, they really don't need for you to agree with them. They just need for you to listen to them. They just need to be heard. Now, let's face it, when somebody's in your face and telling you things and real forceful, you really don't want to listen. You just want them to get away from you. So their defense pattern doesn't usually get their soul need met. Most people run from this person. They don't stand there and listen thoughtfully, or the stuff that comes out of the P's mouth can be so crazy that you think, oh, they can't possibly mean that. And then you get hooked into a discussion and they take you down. So what you need to know is if you truly want to have the heart to help heal this type of individual, and I think you should, because they have a harder life. And it's nice for those of us who haven't had it as hard to give a little here. And all you have to do is listen. And when you find yourself thinking, I want to jump in and say something, don't do it. Just hold on. Don't do it. Don't take it personal that they don't want to know. Their sole need is for you to listen, not for you to tell their opinion or to tell them they're wrong or tell them they're right or any of that, or even to agree. So what you do is to get them to know you listened, you repeat back what they said to you. They say something and you repeat it back. So I'll give you an example. I was at church with a group of church ladies having a church lady conversation, and a P at our church, a guy, and I knew he was a P because he was always in people's face, and they were always trying to avoid him. And apparently he felt very threatened at church. And so this is why he had this behavior all the time. And so one night I'm with the church ladies, and he came running in and he started yelling at me right in my face, saying, your kids are running around in the parking lot. You need to do something. They're going to get hit. This is not good. And I thought, okay, he's a P. I already knew he was a P. So I'm thinking I have to just repeat back what he said. So I'm listening to him. I'm grinding my feet into the floor. In my head, I'm thinking he is the hugest jerk ever, but I don't say it. I just listen. I look him right in the eye and I go, so my kids are running around in the parking lot. And he goes, yes, they're running around and they're going to get hit by a car. And I said, and you're afraid they're going to get hit by a car? And he goes, yes. And so as I repeated what he said, he never said, why are you mocking me? You'd think he would have noticed, but he didn't. He calmed down, and then he very thoughtfully said, you know what, I'll go take care of it. And he walked away. It was the craziest thing. Now, after that, this guy had never really given me the time of day. After that, he would look for me to shake my hand. He'd want to have a conversation, like a pretty normal conversation. But, when somebody has that kind of defense pattern, he really wasn't at the top of the list of who I wanted to be best friends with. But he tried to become my best friend once he knew I was safe. And his little soul knew this is what he needed, somebody to listen, even when it was crazy. So that's type P, and they're kind of tough. Now, I'll tell you, if you're an EPT practitioner, and you have someone who comes in and they talk and talk and talk and talk, and you want to get down to business and do EPT, but they keep talking, if they're type P, you better listen. And if they have to talk for 45 minutes of the hour, they won't mind. They need to know that you heard what they said and that you're listening. So if you notice that and they come in and they're talking and you try to jump in there and say, let's work, and they go, no, I'm not done yet. They're not done yet. Let them talk and listen and repeat back. They will never get upset with you for listening. And even if you have to charge them for an hour and you only got 15 minutes of EPT in, they don't get upset because they needed for you to listen. So that's another kind of thing you need to notice when you're working with people, and it's amazing. So let's see, type P, that's the most difficult. Now I'm going to go to the easiest, type R. Now, the type R is a person when they're being chased by the bear or they're feeling threatened in their environment, they're the person who goes, where's the rule book? I want to follow all the rules. I'm going to color in the lines. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. They furiously go about following the rules when they feel afraid and defensive. These people, in my opinion, run the world. If we didn't have a group of people who constantly followed the rules and looked to do things the right way, I don't know where the rest of us would be. And I'm not a type R, by the way, but my oldest daughter and my oldest son are both type Rs. That's a great defense pattern to have as your oldest children. So your younger children are looking up to the ones who follow the rules and color in the lines and would say, oh my goodness, you would never break the rules. So I was kind of lucky that way, having those oldest ones in that position. I'll tell you though, my daughter, when she learned these, she said, Mom, sometimes I want to color outside of the lines and I can't. And what she was expressing was the problem with the type R is I don't know who I am outside of the rules I'm following. I want to know that I'm more than these rules, but I don't know if I can stretch out and color outside of those lines. So the main issue is authenticity, their denial of their real self. And their greatest fear is imperfection. They have experienced denial of psychological and spiritual reality. Their defensive action is they act appropriately rather than authentically. So they're not even really sure who they are outside of their appropriate behavior. The result of their defensive action is their inability to experience their own self. The world becomes false. Their relationship to their core essence is they do not experience individuated essence. It just doesn't exist. It's as if they don't exist outside of following the rules. Their human need is to put themselves into life, to feel their real self. Their spiritual need is to experience unitive and individual core essence within themselves. Their time distortion is the constant, rigid, mechanical movement of time forward. Tick, 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 tick. It's like they're just moving forward very mechanically. Now, the healing response to type R, because they tend to be too grounded, is to put your hand over their heart. So even if you are an R and you know you're one of these rule keepers, what's really awesome about being an R, because your defense pattern is to follow the rules and do the right thing, things typically work out really well for you. You're the one who's got a retirement plan. You're the one who did the 401k. You're the one who invested in something correctly or stayed married, who knows how to be in a good marriage. Type R's are just overall have their life is easier because the way they go into defense is to follow the rules. And following the rules usually gets you pretty good results. So if you're a type R and you feel like my daughter, sometimes I just want to follow. I want to color outside the lines. One of the ways you can help yourself balance in type R is to put your hand over your heart, and it raises you up from being way too grounded in that root chakra, and it brings energy up from the heart, and that allows you to connect to your own self, your own desires, your own truth. So that's one of the things she talks about in her book for type R. If you have a child that you know does this, that when you're talking to them or you see them in defense, where they're, what do I do? What do I do? I just need to know what to do. That would be a little kid. You put your hand on the behind their heart and on their back and in the front on their chest, and you just hold it there while you're doing statements with them. And that actually helps lift them from that defensive pattern that's way too grounded in the root chakra. And they need to come up and know their spiritual essence. All right, the next type I'm going to talk about is type M. This defense pattern, this is the person who does the opposite. This is the person you're in the car with and you say, where do you want to eat for dinner? And they say, I don't know, you pick. And you say, well, I want to go to Chili's. And they go, no, I don't want to go to Chili's. And you go, well, where do you want to go? I don't know, you pick. And so you pick Perkins. And they say, no, I don't want to go to Perkins. And finally you're exasperated. You go, would you just pick? And they're like, well, I don't want to pick. I don't know what I want. Because they really don't know what they want, except they don't want you to tell them what they want. It's so frustrating. They demand and they resist. So it's type M. Their main issue is they feel like they've been invaded and stolen from, that they've had invasion and theft, that they've inherited emotions from. So they're responding to the idea that in their life, somebody has come and just taken from them. And their fear is being controlled and a loss of self. So they're afraid if they go to Chili's when you recommend it, you made them go there, right? They feel uncomfortable if you decided where the two of you are going to dinner, because they're afraid if you decided that you made them do it. So one of my daughters had this issue, the younger daughter, Dana, she would come out with two outfits in the morning when she was 5 or 6 years old, and she'd say, which one should I wear, Mom? And I would pick the one that I didn't want her to wear. She would come out with the one I wanted her to wear on. And I'd go, well, I picked the other one. And she goes, I know, but I just decided to wear this one instead. She couldn't decide which outfit. She couldn't decide what she wanted until she knew what I wanted her to wear, because the only way she could be herself was to do the opposite of what I told her. So she wasn't really consciously thinking. She was just going for the opposite. Now, I would say to her later, I really wanted you to wear that outfit, the one that she had on, and she would just kind of freak out. But she was also the child that I could manipulate if I needed to. If she wasn't doing what I wanted, I could say the opposite and get her to do it. And she'd be like, automatically, she would go to do the opposite, which was really what I wanted her to do. So I kind of manipulated her into doing it. And she knew something was up, but she wasn't sure what. And I didn't do that very often, but I did use it sometimes. I did have 5 kids I was trying to run around. And the other thing that I would tell her all the time as she grew up was, only you know what you want. Nobody, including me, can get in your head and make you want something that you don't want. Only you know what you want. So that became our mantra. And this girl, she grew up, she's in her 20s, and I would say she, most of the time, is super clear about what she wants. And she has lived her life in a very directed way. So even though she was the 4th in a family of 5 kids, which could have put her at the low end of the pecking order, which would have made her feel threatened most of the time, she really blossomed in her consciousness. She also got a lot of EPT as well. And I always went back to this thought, this mantra, only you know what you want. And you can decide that, and nobody can take that away from you. Nobody can control your thoughts or control what you want and take it away. So what they have experienced is an invasion and humiliation. And as the fourth kid, she definitely had experienced that. Although I still believe that we inherit these responses. And her dad is this type. So my husband he is a type M. So they're very much alike when you look at them and the way they respond, because they both have this same pattern. So the defensive action is demand and resist at the same time. So it's, I want that. No, I don't. I want that. No, I don't. Could you make me eggs? No, I don't want eggs. I want cereal. That kind of thing. It can drive people crazy. But if you have someone in your life who has this going on, you can just sit back and let them have all the room to say, well, I don't want that. Okay, what do you want? I don't know what I want. See, when you say to them, what do you want? They feel like you've controlled them too. If I tell you what I want now, you made me tell you, and I don't want to do it if you're going to make me. So they feel they're a little, you got to back off, give them room, and let them know that it's okay to know what they want and that you're not trying to make them do anything. So their result of their defensive action is dependence, the inability to differentiate between self and other. So what this means is, I don't know what I want. So the only way I know what I want is to hold two outfits up, and I want to know what you want me to want. Then I know I want the other. So I haven't really made a conscious decision. So that's the result of their defensive action. The relationship to core essence is their individuated essence is not differentiated from others. They feel like you and them are the same. So they kind of feel this resistance, and they can't identify who they are and what they want because they're so defensively trying to keep you from controlling them. Their human need is to be free to feel and express themselves, but this is really hard for them sometimes. Their spiritual need is to recognize themselves and their core essence as their own and claim God within themselves. Their time distortion, I love this time distortion because I live with it. My husband and my daughter experience the unfoldment of time as stopped. So what that looks like in a family with a kid who has this, we all go to Walmart and I tell them all, okay, come to the front of the store. I'm checking out. And Dana heads to the back of the store. And it's as though she thinks she's got all the time in the world. Time just stopped and she's going to go and do a bunch of stuff before I check out. And we're all waiting for her because she's not there. So there's this sense that time just stops and they've got all the time in the world, the unfoldment of time. And I watched her do that so much. So let's see. The next one we're going to talk about is type S. These are the people who are natural psychics. Their defense pattern is they fly out of their body. So I have my youngest had this, and literally we would watch him. He's the youngest, so he felt defensive all the time too because everybody in the pecking order was ahead of him. So he'd get in trouble and I would be talking to him. And as I'm talking to him and, telling him you can't do that or, scolding him, he would literally, his eyes would shift up to the left side of his head and he'd look away, up and to the left, which is kind of where the spirit enters and leaves the body. And I would say, look at me. And he would try to leave his body. And you could tell he was doing it because his eyes would take off. And that was how he defended himself. When he felt like he was in trouble, he would not look at you. He would try to his whole body posture would be moving away with the head, moving toward the left. And he literally was just checking out. And that's what type S does. They check out. This is the kid in a classroom. The teacher says, Earth to Joey, come in, Joey, because Joey has left the building. And Joey is doing that because it's really easy for an S to just slip right out. Their main issue is existential terror. So this is what they've inherited that creates this automatic check out of their body, and that's how they deal with a threatening environment. So when you think of existential terror, someone who has been severely abused, the only way they can survive is to check out. So that's what the type S does. Their fear is living in the human body as an individual. They've experienced direct aggression and their defensive action is to leave their body. The result of the defensive action is a weaker body. So I'm going to tell you, I've had people who have headaches, chronic headaches, and what I find in them is they tend to leave their body. They don't feel safe in their body, and so they're kind of halfway in, halfway out, and that causes their body to be weaker. So they have chronic problems like headaches are very common with this type of person. Their relationship to core essence, they can experience unitive essence, and they're afraid of individuated essence. So they're kind of afraid of being in their body. And their human need is to individuate, to surrender to being human, that you are full body, you're full mind, and you're full spirit. Their spiritual need is to experience individuated essence. So spiritually, they have to notice that they are an individual and they have to experience that essence within their body. The healing response to this type is to put your hand at their lower abdomen on the front and the back, on their sacrum in the back and in their lower abdomen, because they tend to leave their body. You have to bring warmth down to that core level, that lower abdomen, and it'll bring them back into their body. For my son, I would always hold him. I would put my hands on his legs or his knees or right there at his abdomen and hold him at just below the waist. And that would force him to come back in his body because there was somebody touching him there. So the time distortion, this one just kind of blows my mind. But people who leave their body as their defense pattern. In other words, the environment gets threatening and you check out and later somebody says, wow, I couldn't believe that happened. And you go, really? I missed it. Or was it that bad? Because you were checked out. So the time distortion experiences universal time, is unable to experience linear time, or be in the now in the physical world. So a person who has this defense pattern, they're all over the place. They don't think of time in a linear fashion. They think of time all happening at once. I can't even get my head around this, but those of you who have this defense pattern, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so I'm going to tell you type S and type R, they're kind of a perfect match, because if they're like a couple, and my father and mother were type S and type R, so I have a father who's a type R, follows the rules, but he's a little too grounded, and a mom who is type S, and she leaves her body. So when they get together, they balance each other out. Kind of a neat thing. And they seem to understand each other really well and feel good with each other because one is too grounded and one is too flighty, and they balance. All right, the last defensive type, type O. All right, so you're all wondering, that's me. This is me. This is the one I go into. So if you see me sucking the life out of anybody, you know that I'm in defense and I'm just singing my song. I'm playing that unconscious pattern without a thought in the world. No conscious thought of doing anything, just automatically playing it out. So type O is, the main issue is nurturance. The greatest fear is not enough of anything. The experience is lack of nurturance and a feeling of abandonment. The defensive action is sucking the life out of people. So type O's are never enough. I'm never going to be enough. So the minute I feel like there's not enough money, I'll never have enough money. Why do I even bother? Type O's are so weary with not enough, not enough, not enough. Their fear is they're not enough. And the minute something threatens them, they go into this pattern of it's not enough. And their defensive action is they suck life. So they can go and take off, and I want to say they suck the life out of other people by whining and complaining and feeling like I'm just never going to be enough, blah, blah, blah. You know, they're the poor me people, the type O. The result of the defensive action is the inability to metabolize their own energy. So they drain their own energy reserves when they go into their defensive pattern of poor me, I'm never going to be enough, I got left behind and I can't catch up. That's kind of the type O. And they'll whine at people. They totally will whine at people, and they'll go into their little depressive mode. They're the person who, when they get attacked, they just quiver and say, go ahead, hit me. That's what I deserve. That's the response. It's very lacking in power. Their relationship to their core essence is they experience individuated essence as not enough. So no matter what I do, no matter how good it is, once I'm in defense, I can go right back to it's never going to be enough. I'm not enough. So it's like I reduce, this type O will reduce themselves as their way of defending themselves. If I'm so small and it's insignificant, you won't whop me on the head, sort of. So their human need is to nurture themselves and to know I am enough. Their spiritual need is to experience the individuated essence as the infinite source within. So to know that I have infinite resource out of my infinite source of God. The time distortion is, guess what? Never enough time. So this is, what I noticed as I have become more aware, just by virtue of having so much EPT done and looking at the ways to make my own life better, what I have noticed is it becomes a lot more rare that I go into this automatic defense pattern in my life. However, when I do go into this pattern, which it used to be all the time, I feel like I just kind of lived there. Everything was not enough to me for so much of my life. And then after EPT started happening, it is such a rare thing that I go into that wallowing of I'm not enough. There's not enough. It'll never be enough. It's just so rare that when I go there now, it is so obvious that I'm in a defense pattern. This is not my conscious thinking. This is some inherited pattern that is in there to protect me because something in my environment has frightened me and made me afraid. And I wasn't prepared for it. So my brain goes, here's what you're going to do. You're going to act like a whiny baby. And that's what I do. Being a whiny baby, that is my defense pattern. Not the strongest defense pattern in any way, but definitely if you have this defense pattern, you will recognize it as well. And the more EPT you do, the more those defense patterns stand out. You recognize them and you know, oh, something just triggered me, and you can look in your environment and figure out what it is and totally change that defense pattern so that you can make a conscious decision that is a lot better for your life. So this is the end of part 1, and I want to say that EPT is a mind-blowing holistic therapy that can rapidly expand your awareness and your conscious decision-making in your life. This isn't your traditional type of psychological counseling. EPT is an alternative holistic therapy that helps you release the energy of trapped trauma and negative emotions from your body, mind, and spirit. It involves forgiveness, love, and positive attention. This results in a healthier, happier, and more conscious you. If you are looking for an alternative therapy that can help you develop a deeper, more meaningful awareness in your life so that you can show up as a more loving, happy, and conscious person, get ready to try EPT. This is not where you thought you were going. It's so much better. As always, you can subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and go get your free training at eptworks.com. I'm Dr. Annette Cargioli, the Forgiveness Doctor. Until next time, listen, love, give. EPT works.